Hello, everybody. It's your boys from Irrational Radio here with another Table 13 Smarter Than Your Average Bugbear episode where we go in deep on certain monsters or creatures or gods or servants of gods in the Forgotten Realms 5e D&D lore, as well as expand out into some other things, like kind of use those featured in the monster manual as a jumping off point, and then exploring where they got these guys, where some of these creatures came from, and how to put them into your world, whether it be 5e or not. Just kind of a general overview. This week we're doing Kobolds, the little dragon guys that really enjoy mining so very much. Yeah, Eric, you've done a little bit of research on the origin of where these guys come from. Like before D&D was a thing,
Yeah,
kobolds were a feature of mythology that already existed.
they are. And just a heads up if you're watching this on YouTube and you really just want the stats, we're going to get to that and when we get back from the break, ideally. So jump to about like an hour into this, probably.
Yeah.
40 minutes, right to the end of our break there. Either way, getting back to this, the sort of, mythological origin of kobolds, it's actually kind of interesting. They're in the same category as things like brownies or fairies, elves, and a lot of these other kind of Germanic Norse traditions where they're sort of the spirit of a house or any other. There's a bunch of natural phenomena. They get associated with all sorts of various things there, but they tend to do favors when they're kept happy, and there are minor whatever rituals completed to keep them in their to keep the residents in their good graces. But then if they're not kept happy, then like pranks and whatever random mishaps are essentially attributed to them.
Bad stuff.
There's sort of these pucks, the classic kind of forest trickster kind of Feywild type creature, like Shakespearean Fey creature kind of deal. And then beyond that, actually, the etymology of the word is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It was one of the kind of cool pieces that I found anyway when I was going through this stuff, is that apparently the word cobalt for the element is connected to this, this old creature, this understanding of these sort of trickster spirits that inhabited mines specifically were the ones they were talking, or that got the connection associated with them, because cobalt apparently resembles nickel and gold ore when it's in a rock. It can kind of fool the miners into thinking that they have more valuable, material than they thought they had, or than they really have, or whatever. But also, it would chemically, cobalt would bind with some damaging stuff like arsenic or whatever in a gaseous form. So then miners would be hitting these veins of what they thought was normal rock, and unexplained sicknesses would go around. People would die and stuff like that. And until the advent of the understanding of modern chemistry, where we have the periodic table elements and stuff, people were just attributing it to these kobolds, to these spirits of the mine, essentially. And when, whatever the guy's name was who discovered it, I'm sure I heard it today a couple times and I can't remember, but he's sort of a bit of synchronicity there. He's like, hey, yeah, it's still the kobolds, kind of, which I think that was kind of funny.
I like
It's
that.
an interesting connection. That they really do. They've been around for a long time, and they've been associated with the subterranean, work of miners and things of that nature, crafts and things like that.
But they weren't always like lizardy, though.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah,
in those depictions, they're frequently either like an animal or a small humanoid, like a person that's just little, or a child, or like there's some depictions that they're like it's neither a man nor a child but has features of both or
Uh,
something weird like that. It's like
no.
I don't know what that means.
I like the lizard description better than that. That would be terrifying.
Yeah.
I don't want to live in the world where you have like man children running around with pickaxes. That's not okay.
And it's kind of funny to me to think about. Yeah, as I heard one of the WebDM guys, he said in one of his games, because he made them more along the lines of like a like a forest hag or whatever. There's
Mm-hmm.
sort of these solitary, um, kind of tricksters that basically want to be left alone, but when people mess with them, they cause problems, and those problems then get a response from the outside world or whatever. Um, but I totally lost my train of thought there. There was a connecting point from bringing that up. But yeah, he makes them look like just little old grumpy men apparently, which I thought was kind of funny.
That is interesting.
And he's got some of them that work in the sewers and keep like they're like he called them some of his gutter fairies or something, that just help keep the city working. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's
Gutter fairies.
an interesting concept. But that's I think there is this tradition of in mythos. You look at Celtic and Norse and Germanic folklore. There is a tradition of gutter fairies, but basically really mundane spirits that are involved in everyday tasks and that just assist in the or cause problems with the general upkeep and maintenance of your house or whatever.
Almost like to explain through mythology those little things that go wrong. Like you're trying to bring the trash outside, you knock over the broom, and then it hits the cat's water bowl and throws water all over. You're just like, freaking house spirits.
Yeah, should have carved the totem to the kobold better. Yeah, or something. It's not in a prominent enough spot in your
go back
on your
it's upside down or something. And you're just like, God damn it! Man, I forgot the kobold fetish symbol. Well, it's interesting, and you can kind of draw the lines between how the Wizards of the Coast or the creators of D&D, in the one Wizards of the Coast back then, but how they made the connection between, like, because as we found out today, kobolds and goblins in the very early editions in D&D were basically the same thing. And if you look at like the mythology of goblins and these guys, they also kind of fit the same line.
They're brownie-esque. They're kind of gnome related. They're that same sort of just trickster type, creature. It's just one of these many names we gave to the same kind of phenomenon, or that people gave to a similar phenomenon.
But there were like minor spirits or minor inconveniences. And so in the first edition, they were grouped together in the same character sheet or same NPC sheet, saying like, these are the squishy bad guys. These are the weakest of the like things that are going to come at you with swords and shields. Whereas like the wolf or like the giant spider is the that's the what the level 1 party is going to go against in the wilds. These are like what the level 1 party is going to go against if you want something to shoot a sling at your party or something like that. But in the later editions, they did begin to give them their own lore. And by the third edition, they were pretty important in the backstory of the entire continent of the Forgotten Realms of Faerun.
So I think you can see in sorry, jumping.
No, go ahead.
You see in a couple other spots, the Magic the Gathering universe, they're not super prominent. I think it's like a dozen or so cards across like one of the first 5 editions.
Oh, that's interesting.
They were put out, but they're basically just goblins that have red, blue, or green skin, essentially. But they're crafty. They make artifacts and stuff, and they're I think all arrayed under a dragon. And then in WoW, they're not reptile, but they are mining focused, and they've got the take candle joke because that was one of the common like forms that kobolds took back in folklore.
Okay.
And then I guess to sort of connect the dots on that, on sort of why I think D&D later came in with this sort of dragon connection. is because they were when they were formed as fire, when they showed up as like the spirit of a flame or a torch or a candle or whatever, they would they call them drakes or pucks, but I think that's the line. They were like, oh,
Yeah.
it's fire, and they call them drakes. We also call our dragons drakes. Cool. Draconic.
Baby drake, baby dragons.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. And they had scales from early on, so hey,
right.
why not?
Yeah. And it's really cool to watch those kinds of mythos develop into games from, old Germanic wives' tales.
Right. Yeah. Or the difference that, you look at the World of Warcraft kobolds just aesthetically, or Hearthstone, whatever you're familiar with it from. It's just, they're not little lizard people.
No.
And it's interesting that the D&D understanding is probably more common than any other, really.
Right.
At least in my mind, anyway. It's probably slanted perspective.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when you say like the WoW kobolds, I think of little lizard people, even though, if you look them up, they're definitely rat people in WoW.
Like hunched kind of mole dudes with like rat tails.
Right.
But they're, like a naked mole rat look. So if you weren't thinking about it, you could definitely paint that as a, lizard with a rat tail for whatever reason, kind of got fur here and there or something. So sure. And tomato at that point.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
When you're just talking about that sort of aesthetic dressing stuff, those are that's really easy stuff to reskin or
yeah.
whatever.
Oh, absolutely. So going into kind of what the 5e background is on these guys.
Mm-hmm.
So they are they fulfill an interesting, I think, niche in like the lore of the Forgotten Realms and Faerun. And their base backstory is when the mortal dragons were born, they wanted a way to propagate their power, and Ioun, the god dragon, gave them the ability to do that, in that they could make a life, they could create life, but they would lose their immortality, and they had to cut off a piece of their own body in order to birth the races. Well, in that ritual of them cutting their bodies to create the races, blood dripped onto the ground, and from this blood were born the first kobolds. The first one was born from a green dragon who did the ritual first, and it's like Kurluk or something like that.
Turtlemak.
No, well, Kurtlemak is the god, but the dragon is like
the dragon.
Kirkle or something like that. But yeah, the god of the first kobold was Kurtlemak, and he's a bigger kobold than the rest of them. He becomes the dragon's like first in command of the other kobolds of that warren, and they amass the enough treasure that the dragon is like, you know what, I'm richer than everything. You can go be your own people now. You can go ahead and just like do your own shit. So Kurtleback began to build his own empire, and in the process of that, as they were becoming very powerful, they found a gnomish cache of gnomish gems. And in Faerun, gnomes come from gems. They're born from gems. And they basically held them hostage and made the gnomes slaves until the gnomish god, Garl Glittergold, tricked Kurtlemak and collapsed the entirety of their empire into the earth, causing Kurtlemak to be lost in a infinite maze forever. And it's because of this that kobolds hate gnomes, and gnomes hate kobolds.
And they've hated gnomes before this was a thing.
Yeah.
Like, going back to the earliest printings of kobolds, there's at least a sentence that says they hate gnomes. So it's funny. They've hated them since before there was like a canon reason.
Before there was a reason. Yeah, exactly. And it's hilarious because the symbol for Kurtlemak is generally a gnome skull with a dagger going through the top of it. Or some kind of weapon. Sometimes it's a pickaxe head too. Yeah. And that's just, it's hilarious because that's something that you can, if you take part in the Faerun, in Faerun, in the Forgotten Realms world, you, as a gnome player, that's something that you can like keep in mind when fighting these guys. because you know there are these lines between races, such as like elves and orcs. You know, it's just like an orc, a mountain orc will kill an elf. Just they won't even torture an elf; they'll just kill him immediately. Whereas and you know the same with the kobolds. They hate gnomes so much, and gnomes are supposed to hate them so much back that your peaceful, loving gnome wizard, who's always the one to you know try to talk it out, you know, but sees the nest of kobolds and just like, nope, no, we gotta burn that down,
Smash all the eggs.
smash all the eggs. Yeah, it's they're
Yeah.
abominations.
Yeah, I
but
think that's interesting.
yeah, it's really, I like that some of the races have that kind of one-to-one. Here is the NPC that is just going to make your character lose their shit. And
in my head they're similar to how elves and drow interact.
Yeah,
It's
that's
kind of
also
that same interplay. They're basically the two sides of the same coin deal.
Yep.
And like, yeah, there maybe isn't necessarily any connection genetically or whatever. They're not the same race, but their origin stories are intertwined very closely. And actually, that's another thing. I love the idea that that's just the gnomish side of this story, maybe, and that like maybe because if you go to that same origin story, this you know, big bad dragon that is has the kobolds working under to secure all of her material wealth, and secured more material wealth than any other dragon on the plane. If Garl was able to carve the first gnomes from gems, maybe it's just because they had a bunch of gems and Garl needed to have gems to do that, and that was the only place they were way better at finding them. And you know, because they, you know, there's divination magic and stuff like that that's there, so you can even start to try to say, you know, yeah, okay, that's one side of the story potentially that makes it out, so that the kobolds seem like they're the bad guys because they were there and they were enslaving these unborn gnomes or whatever. When in reality, they were just doing, you know, they were just gathering gems, and may or may not have even been aware of the, you know, ability of Garl to turn gems into gnomes or something. And all of a sudden, somebody's breaking in and stealing this stuff that they've gathered as like a work of worship to their like, god, you know. And so, hey, maybe it's a little more understandable that like they respond in kind, and so and they're going to compete over similar living spaces and stuff like that. So you can turn this into a you know, victors tell the right history kind of thing or whatever.
Absolutely. So because of that, because of that collapse, they rarely, there's no empire of kobolds anymore. They gather together in large, I almost want to say hives, because they're very,
I think they call them warrens, but
warrens, but that are usually like super treasure laden. Usually they are some of the most treasure-filled areas that next to dragon layers that you can find in this world, because they're just so good at mining, and they love
they are surrounding a dragon.
Yeah,
you know, they're in direct service to a dragon, and I think a lot of that is a result of the sort of origin of D&D being, you know, you kick in the door and there's all of these, you know, preset traps and a bunch of you know, uneaten food in chests, and they're the kind of people who build that sort of thing, set it up, and then, you know, leave, or, you know, they're the reason that, or they built it around the dragon that's at the center, so they're the mooks that are, you know, whatever, populating it. Your various like minion creatures that you fight along the way, they serve that purpose of the dungeon part of Dungeons and Dragons that was at the core in the beginning.
And a little bit of the dragon part too, you know, like
exactly. Now they're especially dragon related, but that, you know, I think they found themselves being surrounding a big dragon, because you have this huge long dungeon that your party goes through, and then the fight at the end is almost always going to be a dragon, and it's so it, you know, wasn't maybe built in or, you know, written into the canon essentially, but I think it was how it was manifesting at the table, because of things like the Tucker's Kobolds, a place where the idea of like, okay, they're murderous ambush tactic, like yeah, they spend forever on their traps, and they're smart, and they're cunning. They're intelligent enough to use their conditions to their advantage, and to spend a crap load of time on a really complicated trap that maybe nobody will ever trip, kind of
Yep.
thing. Um, so they're, I think they're, yeah, one of the, it was something we were talking about earlier. I don't know if we brought it up here yet or not, but it's one of the more like evenly fleshed out races that are
Yeah.
the traditional bad guys, I guess. They're frequently one of the most common first encounter creatures, right up there with goblins or skeletons or orcs or whatever. But they can still be used to pose a serious threat down the line, I think, as well.
Yeah, and you
Because of this
bring
stuff.
up Tucker's Kobolds, and I want to talk about that a little bit, because it is an example, and I was gonna maybe save this for the second part of the video, but I wanted to at least touch on it here. Is that like they are represented as very weak, individually, but they are supposed to be a high, or like at least in 3.5 and later editions,
Right.
they're supposed to be represented as more of a threat than goblins or than like a cave full of spiders, even though they have similar CR ratings, because they are more organized. There are more of them usually in a single location than goblins or something other than that.
Right.
And as you pointed and you said, they're more focused on like traps and keeping what they have in more of a ownership mentality rather than like a goblin where it's just shiny for shiny's sake.
Right.
And the Tucker kobolds are an interesting, it is a dungeon, kind of a famous dungeon, I suppose you'd say, where a man named Tucker built a hive of these guys that could apparently take on like level 10 players, and to have like a group of 30 or 40 1/8 CR creatures, even to put them in scenarios where they have a chance against such high level player characters, really speaks to their deadliness, and how
Absolutely.
DMs ought to use them. Like in my opinion, especially with kind of the lore, you really should use them as like the higher level swarm creatures. Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, like you shouldn't have, unless of course every table's different, but in my opinion, to use them well would be to introduce those like, oh, big swarm of cave spiders. The first mission. Second mission, they're taking out goblin caves and they're going against orcs. And then get them really comfortable with the idea of, okay, if it's like two or three things, we're in more trouble than if we see 8 things or 10 things come out of the woods. And then get them to the point where then they find a kobold nest, a kobold warren, and they're like, oh yeah, we've got this. They're little, maybe have like the 2 guards out front, they have,
Mm-hmm.
you
Get
just get
splatted,
splatted, and they're
no
like, oh
problem.
yeah, look how much
This will be
like
easy.
gems are on these guys. Holy shit. And they go in, and we'll talk more about that in the later part there, because yeah, that's
Everything covered in poop.
yeah,
That's
just oh god, oh man, better make some con checks, go with those
Mhm.
dexterity saves. But yeah, so it's interesting, especially lore wise. Going more a little bit into the lore too, is they're like a kind of almost a better version of a lot of different races in terms of more extreme in certain areas. For instance, they hold grudges better than dwarves, apparently.
Right.
And they can mine better than dwarves. They have a better sense of pulling material out of the ground. Maybe not. They're definitely not better than dwarves in crafting that material they pull out. Even
You could argue that.
yeah,
I would say with the traps and stuff, at least that
yeah.
focus
Oh
on
yeah,
that kind of stuff, rather
absolutely.
than maybe like arms and armor.
Right. I suppose, yeah, when I
But
said that,
still.
I meant like arms and armor rather than just base crafting, because yes, they are craftier than goblins, or at least equal to craftiness of goblins. And one of the things I love too is that they love what they do. This is not like a goblin horde where you have one goblin up top forcing the other goblins to do the worst work possible. These guys are a hive of mutually assistant creatures that love to work. If they are mining, they are happy. They are Sisyphus fulfilled. They love to mine so much that their religion says that if you die in combat, you get to go to the mine in heaven that Curdlemac is running. You get to mine in heaven, and you never get tired. You know, you just get to mine and pull out all the precious resources you want. I love that. Like, that is, like, in terms of lore, that is much better than anything that they've come up with goblins. You know, I love the idea of, you know, you're holding this dying kobold in your hand, in your arms, after you've slaughtered the ad. Like tell me, you know, where the rest of you are, and it's like, I get to go mine in heaven. And just like,
he
what?
spits in your face.
Yeah,
And that's you know, you see them getting splatted, and there's a wave that are still coming at you. And I think that's the other thing, is that they are like incredibly body for the team. Like, you know, who cares? I would, you know, because if I die in service of the, you know, the group, then they've got like a reincarnation thing that they're supposed to worry about, and that whole cycle is affected positively by, you know, how much they were a help to the group as a whole. And that's, they are a much more, like, I guess, like, honorable race than a lot of the you know, the traditional bad guys are, by the way they're written. And things like that are much more important. They'll like, everybody just lays eggs in a big room, and nobody knows whose kid's who, and they all raise them as, like, you know, everybody's kids are everybody's kids kind of thing. I was saying before, they remind me of ants, like, and you're talking about swarm creatures and it being like a hive. They are more like ants than they're like gnomes or dwarves, I think.
Absolutely.
In the way they function.
Absolutely.
And I think that's like a very cool concept to work with, just as a whole. The like, for the greater good. Like,
right. Even though they're not in the monster manual, they also have the ability to be born as sorcerers. Because of their draconic bloodline. They do have pure dragon blood in them. They are technically true dragons in terms of bloodline. So occasionally dragon blood. So you do as a kobold, you do have the ability to be born as a sorcerer. Though there is a pretty interesting ritual that goes along with becoming a kobold sorcerer. Apparently, you have to fast for 9 days, and then go into a meditative stance for 24 hours where you reach the one dragon, like the dragon state. And in doing that, you unlock your draconic bloodline and be able to actually cast the spells locked inside of you. And what's disappointing is they don't show this in the monster manual. They do talk about the winged kobolds, which are like a evolutionary branch of them. Some are born with wings, and they're actually seen as lower caste members in society because the rest of the race is kind of jealous of their ability to fly.
We don't have wings.
So we're not gonna let you sit at this table.
You gotta go up, live on the surface, fly or whatever.
But if you want to add some spice to these guys, give one or two the ability to hurl a fireball, because that'll make, oh man, if you have a big swarm of dudes and one up on a ridge throwing spells down at your party while they're swamped, it's going to make it a much more difficult encounter than
or just throw pack tactics onto like
one
of the NPC stat blocks of the casters, you know, an adept, a priest, or whatever. You could just give them pack tactic, or not. You could just throw one of those on the field, and tell everybody, it's a small sized
Right.
version with a D6 mace instead of a D8, whatever, or, you know, um, I do that a lot. But yeah, they don't have any, like lizard. There's a lizard man shaman, or lizard folk shaman. I think
Right.
there's,
Yep.
most of the is ogre magi. They generally, with the races, that it's understood that there is a traditional connection to the arcane, then that there is some sort of, like a cleric or whatever is represented in the stat blocks. But you can dig around and find
Oh
something
yeah.
that'll work.
Oh yeah.
I think.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Other lore stuff that's interesting. We did a lot of research on lore. Oh, you mentioned the reincarnation stuff. I wanted to also say something about that because it's kind of funny. Yeah, a kobold that dies in service to the clan, and to further the clan's own interest, will get reincarnated. Will get to spend time in Curdlemax's hall of mining in heaven, and then eventually get reincarnated back as a kobold. If you do something as a kobold that is very like a great act, a heroic act, something that not only is best for the tribe but maybe saves the entire clan, you may get reincarnated as a true dragon. But if you die trying to serve your own ends, you get reincarnated as a giant weasel, which is a mount of kobolds in older editions. And if you do something,
it's like a pack domesticated,
yes,
pack
like
animal
a
type
domesticate,
thing
a
in
giant
modern,
domesticated weasel.
yeah. There's just a nice little bit of irony there.
Right.
Like, oh, you
And
couldn't serve the whole. Okay, well now you don't get a
you
choice.
don't get a choice.
Yeah.
And if you do
Yeah.
something that betrays the clan, if you die betraying the clan, you come back as what's the equivalent of a giant dung beetle. That is what they hunt for food. So it's
And
kind
armor
of,
and stuff.
yeah, and armor and stuff. So it's kind of, if you don't serve the clan, you are going to be forced to. If you betray the clan will kill you over and over again in the next
They'll benefit
lives.
from you eventually.
Eventually,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
You'll die serving the clan one way or
One
another.
way or another, yeah. And so
Yeah.
it's fascinating that you have this ingrained idea of for the clan, for the community, but they're not hive mind. They definitely have their own
Yeah.
individuality. They can even like they're kind of unique in the smaller races in that they trade with other
Yeah.
races. They just don't like being discovered that they are. So there's a picture of like three kobolds in a trench coat. That
Which it could
was
be a little more, they're
right,
magic, right? So they could
right.
just have disguised self or something.
Illusion,
But
stuff like that. But if
how much
you,
funnier is it if
or,
they
yeah, I just think,
three kobolds in a trench
you know,
pretending to be a lizard folk or something? Like,
so that was an interesting hook. That
yeah.
if you're interested in
Yeah.
getting a party into one of these things, have them find a cache of gems, and then have them try to sell those gems. Or if your wizard wants to get revivify, the diamond that you need for revivify,
Like,
or the cleric that you need to revivify, have the guy selling the diamond be weird, or like, oh, you
yeah.
see a small lizard hand poke out of the folds of his robe, grab the diamond and disappear,
Wearing
and
a
then
weird, mask or something.
yeah, exactly, his mask slips, yeah. So it would be that's how they can be introduced to parties if you were interested in getting them involved in your party in some way.
Absolutely.
Because yeah, it's just
Yeah. And I think
yeah.
there's room for them to be, there's history of them warring with goblins a ton, and there is room with the way that they just like super prolifically reproduce. It's like it's like 2.5 months,
Right.
but from egg to like a kobold that's able to walk around and like feed itself and stuff, like hours after being hatched at the end of this 2.5 months. So and then they're able to start, they're adult at 6, but
Yeah.
live to 120 or
Right.
100 plus, and some longer than that. So you have this like, you at least can understand that there's this like infestation like quality that would happen very quickly.
Yep.
with like, you know, a dozen kobolds suddenly becomes, you know, 1,200 in maybe like 6 months or whatever, you know, and it's like, well, a little longer than that, but you know, a year or two, all of a sudden you have like thousands of them running around under your city streets, and like,
It's bad
holy
news.
crap.
Yeah, and that's actually where like nations run into these guys, is when the clans get so big they split in half.
Yeah.
One half stays with the original warren, and the other half has to go find a new one. And so you
like ants,
right? Just like ants. And so, you know, they might have been in the mountains, like carving like hollowing an entire mountain out, and then they got to a point where they're like, this mountain's too big, we'll go to the next mountain over. But your country is in the middle of the valley between the two mountains. You have 6,000 of these very jealous dragon men, you know, scrambling across your land, and that's just, it's gonna be bad.
It's bad news.
It's gonna be really
don't like
bad.
that.
No, they're eating sheep and stuff. So that's one of the ways that like those kinds of countries can wind up having to deal with these guys.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's worth looking into, because there's this tradition of them not just being like an aggressive infiltration force or anything like that. They don't tend to engage in like protracted military conflicts.
Right. They don't conquer either. They don't like.
Yeah, they just move in, and then suddenly there's another 100 of them, and like you're like, holy crap! Like, where's all the food going?
Yeah.
So it's a very different kind of threat, but it is kind of interesting to look at it as you know, the surface races who have all, or you know, the human-looking races, all banding together and saying, okay, yeah, no, fuck that. That's not okay. That's like, we're gonna run us out of business here. We can't keep that sustained.
Yep. Yep.
It's pretty quickly, you look at, it's compared to some of the other races, like when, you know, elves taken hundreds of years to be considered adults, and you know, still only having a couple kids in their near 1,000-year lifespan or something.
Yep.
It just, the math doesn't work out. It doesn't matter how good your soldiers are if they're outnumbered, you know, 1,000 to 1 or something.
Yep. And that's how they fight. That's how kobolds fight.
If they're forced to.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just gonna be bad news.
Throwing waves after waves against more heavily armored people, and like, it's almost like the orcs in 40K. You know, like, we're gonna beat you because we're going to clog up your battlefields with bodies so much you won't be able to move, and then we're gonna stab you. You know,
we'll get up over the wall by piling up our dead once we get there, and then we'll make it over, and then you'll be in trouble.
And, you know, that's the thing. It's like they don't suffer like the kind of routing that goblin armies would, because they truly believe that in the cause. It's not even like, for the greatest glory for themselves, like an orc. It is,
or a hobgoblin, or something.
The hobgoblin. Maybe. It is for the clan. You know, it's the hive's strength, or the warren's strength is above all, and that's represented even in like how they view the reincarnation, like we talked about. You know, if you don't believe that, it's bad.
And then also there's some like the prominent like hero figures or whatever dying. There was mention, at least from what I heard, that it's common for them to sort of, okay, somebody dies, the next egg that's born, if they're a big enough, fat enough hero, they're going to be popped into that egg immediately. It's the next, so they like watch really closely. They'll find the next egg that's gonna hatch, and they separate it, and they raise, you know, they'll like groom that kobold to fill the role of the person who just died potentially, and, you know, name them something, you know, the same name or a similar variation. And so I think that there's that added, like, if you take out the leader, they're going to fight twice as hard, not like worry about routing like with the goblin, where if you take out the bugbear, nothing's keeping them anymore. There's nothing that they're scared of more than you anymore. So they don't have to keep fighting. Inks.
I heard that.
Back there. But I think that's kind of a cool point as well. Like you're saying, they're true believers. They're fanatics or whatever, and it's makes them much more dangerous.
Mining so much. They're fanatical about mining. their families, and that's
they're
just
they're like Puritans.
yeah,
And
they're
like
really
the,
like
like
yeah,
pilgrims. Like, oh yes, work is worship, and like family
right.
first, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah.
very funny to
We will drown you in our blood. Yes, very Puritan.
exactly.
Yes.
That's that maybe less so on that, but the work ethic was
Right.
very. It reminded me it's that that concept of I mean it's some Mesoamerican cultures, South
Right.
American traditions that are similar as well, where these great feats of whatever engineering, architecture, what have you, are worship. It's a form of sacrifice in the name of the divine kind of thing. And I think that's a cool concept.
Yeah.
They
Especially when it
don't
comes
do
to mining and pulling gems out of the ground. That's just you just
and then,
end up with really rich lizard
right.
dudes who just want to keep mining. Like, you're so rich, stop. Like, no, this is what do you mean? No, I'm getting this stuff so I can buy a better pickaxe.
It's not
Like
even.
mine
It's like
faster.
no, because the room we just built another treasure room, and we haven't lined all of
Yeah.
the tiles with with rubies that are exactly
Yep.
the symmetrical size. So we just got to keep I mean,
Gotta keep
you
going.
know,
Yeah.
and so now we've got another wing because we had to clear out all that stone. All that obviously needs to be tiled, and and so it's this like vicious cycle. And oh, by the way, there was another 100 new kobolds born
Right.
yesterday or
Oh,
something.
good.
So
Yeah. The more
yeah,
work
it's
for the
like
work. Yes.
need more like we need more people digging this
Yep.
place out for people to sleep. So blah blah blah, and it
Yeah.
all
It's
just feeds
the
itself, I
yeah,
guess.
the height of Kobold society is complete inefficiency because of overwhelming numbers. If the clan is like, wait, we can't, like, we're having a problem where we can't dig out enough caves to fit the new people being born, yet we have to split. Like, we can't,
Yeah.
like, it's becoming to the point where we have so many new kobolds coming that we can't clear out the space fast enough for them because they're going to make new kobolds.
But
So
that's like a
yeah.
celebration because it's like, okay,
Yes.
cool, we did it. We can now
Woohoo!
go settle a new
Yeah.
colony
Yep.
all
But they're
together
not
with
doing it
this
on
half.
purpose. They're not like,
It's
yes,
just how they are.
everything must be ours. It's
They're
just
just
like,
like,
no, we
oh
just want to
yeah,
dig stuff and
like
live.
that's what living
Yep.
is. Like we just want to keep living
Yep.
and make more of us like any other race. Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know.
It's
They're not
great.
such bad guys.
No.
They're
So
okay.
so remember that as you're wiping their blood from your swords after
Right.
killing 600 of them. All right, so
Maybe
it's
you're the bad guy.
right. Maybe you're the bad guy. Are you just looting them for the loot? Then maybe think about your actions. All right, it is just about 11:15. I think that is a good place to throw up the break video. We will come back the last half hour or so. We're gonna talk really hard mechanics about these guys. So we're gonna give you the stat blocks that are available in the bestiary monster manual. As well as some alternate stat blocks that were published after the monster manual was published.
Yeah,
that
the
make
character
some
race stuff and
yeah,
things along those lines.
make some corrections or some changes, I suppose, as well as things that you could add to these guys mechanically or adjust to make them more powerful or more challenging, such as adding that sorcerer bloodline stuff.
Right.
So. All right, well, we will be back in about 15 minutes, and we will catch you then. Goodbye.
How important is finding out, how much your DM's going to rely like rules as written versus how often they're going to go rule of cool? How would you even go about getting that information from your DM? I guess.
I think that's one thing that a DM needs to be very open about. That's one of the holes you can dig yourself. That if you're not careful, if you want to run everything rules as written, by all means do it. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you have to understand that if you don't actually know all of the rules, and you have to look everything up, that's where you bog it down.
Yep.
Whereas if you can at least have the understanding to where, hey, if a question comes up, is it okay to just decide an answer now and then make a point to look it up later? The main thing is you need to know.
I say
Yeah.
all the time as a DM, like, we'll go with this, and next time we'll make sure we get it right. Look it up after the session so you don't pull the brakes. Or is it more important that get it right, the first time?
That's one of the things you need to be upfront about, because there's no wrong way to do it. I would say the only sort of wrong way is if you're not consistent. If you're going to do it one way, you always do it that way. Whether it's rules as written, whether it's rule of cool, whether it's a combination. When you make a decision, that's across the board. That's for the NPCs, that's for the players, that's for everyone.
Because I think that's gonna turn off a lot of players, and it bugs me sometimes. If I feel like if we're in initiative order, you have to everything goes straight by the description. But in this, if not, then it's more of a neighborhood or whatever. Things along those lines. You can find people frustrated with those kind of differences pretty easily, I think.
Welcome, weary travelers, to Snakeskin Brothels. Come, let our delectable experts rub away the tension of that overbearing dungeon master or that subtly racist murder hobo party member. Our staff are specially trained to make you focus on the one thing that really matters: pleasure. Whether you take a long rest here or simply need to take a load off, let Snakeskin Brothels deliver. It doesn't matter if you're a high elf or a tiefling with family in the third ring of hell. We'll service all your needs. Remember, what happens in the snakeskin stays in the snakeskin. So come, shed your worries and slip into snakeskin, where your pleasure is our business and no one else's. Located in Cornucopia along 7 Cragen Way.
The world is full of danger. In every environment there lurks hidden terrors waiting for their chance to strike. Dr. Gregory Parsnips and his team of hardy adventurers have faced some of the worst monstrosities the world has to offer. And lived. Read their harrowing tales and deeds in Dr. Parsnips' new book, a collection of tales detailing the deeds and courses of Dr. Gregory Arthur Parsnips and Company, featuring a multitude of terrifying and monstrous creatures with which conflict is had. Get your copy today.
I guess just to start, what are some of the big distinctions, I guess, there? What are some of those big different types of ways to play, things to look for people who wouldn't necessarily know to ask, or what questions and stuff along those lines?
Yeah, exactly. That's not exactly something that a lot of people actually put a lot of thought into before you decide to join a game, is certain aspects of the gameplay. Some of these things are rarely thought of beforehand until you get into the game. You realize, hey, I wish we could do, X, and some of those things that don't come up a whole lot are things like tactical style combat versus, a more simplified version, or even large scale combat where it's not, your party versus another group or another party, but instead it may be a battlefield with hundreds of players, not necessarily players, but hundreds of actual NPCs along with the players performing whatever it is that you have to accomplish. Large scale combat is something that is fun when done properly. You have to think about things like espionage, covert operations,
Right.
sort of spy type stuff, which is also I feel like that's a little bit trickier to do, you know, but it's also fun if it can be pulled off properly. Puzzles, you know, some people
Yeah.
are really into puzzles. Some people really hate puzzles.
Yeah. Tons of people like, yeah, puzzles are a huge part of the game, but I think they can, I mean, there are certain types of puzzles that, you know, don't maybe translate as well to certain D&D groups. Like, yeah, if you've got some substitution cipher you're expecting them to write down and crack, there are parties that are going to be all about that, and there are parties that are like going to look at you like, why can't I just roll a skill check or something to get out of this? Like, come on.
A couple of the other things that I like to include: exploration.
Yeah.
Now, exploration is not something that I've personally done a lot of. I know some people that have a lot of fun with it, but as a DM, it's not something that I've delved too deeply into. But that's one of those things that, you know, you want to ask. If that's something that you really like doing, then, you know, think about it.
When you say exploration, I guess, do you mean sort of like the players are looking at a world map that's kind of fogged over and they're slowly revealing chunks of it? Are you talking about like regular pathfinding stuff with your ranger, or I guess, because I hear that talked about, but like you're saying, I don't feel that I've necessarily really ever gotten into that, because I usually have my campaigns in a pretty developed part of the setting that I'm in, or, you know, as much as anything is in the high fantasy setting anyway.
So I suppose what I mean by like exploration is generally if your party's going somewhere perhaps that's not exactly fully mapped. My campaign, my players are currently, everything's mapped out. You know where all the towns are, you know where the roads are, you know where everything's at. There are places you can go, however, that are uninhabited. And that's where the exploration would come in, you know, because nobody has mapped any of this stuff out. So you're basically, your players want to go delve off into this jungle or this area, and they don't know, you don't know what's there. So that's where the whole grid by grid exploration, you know, comes into play. The survival checks, the navigation checks, what have you.
Some overmap kind of, you know, Final Fantasy VII situation or something.
Exactly. When it comes to the specific gameplay styles like we're talking about, you know, obviously you need to know what it is you want to get into. And a lot of these things, 5e is very generic feeling, I guess. Not in a bad way, but where it sort of hands the reins over to the DM. You can do a lot of this stuff. You need to know what it is you want to do, because a lot of it's not actually in the books, you know?
Right. It's like those
crafting
derby car kits, you know?
Oh yeah, exactly.
They give you all the parts. You can make a really cool car, or you can send a block of wood down the track.
Clam season, and you know what that means. That's right, it's the Clam Festival, and clams are half off at King Custard's Bucket Palace. We got steamed clams, baked clams, stuffed clams, fried clams, and so much more clam-related food. You won't fucking believe what we do to clams here. Come on down this Saturday for clam karaoke, clam racing, and of course, bobbing for clams. Get there early for your free clam bib and a chance to meet King Custard.
Well, after that really hard encounter with that terrible beast, I need some new equipment. This looks like a good place to get something. Hello. Can I get...
My name is Cornwall, Snot Gobbler the Fifth. State your business, ruffian.
I was looking for some dungeon equipment?
I will be the judge of that. Kneel, knave.
Neil? But I thought this was a general store.
Of course it is. All customers must kneel before the great Cornwallis Snot Gobbler the Fifth. It is local custom.
Local custom is to kneel before shopkeepers? The last shop I went to didn't force me to kneel.
I am a special shopkeeper. I am Cornwallis Snot Gobbler the Fifth. Now kneel, or you will not peruse my wares.
Are there any other general stores in town?
No.
Of course not. Alright, I'll kneel.
And kiss my feet. And call me Freddy.
No. Nope. 100 feet of rope is not worth this. Nope. Nope. Well, at least I can get something to eat.
Hello, I am Gregory Smith Bumtackle, the
Fuck. So you're a bard, a master of performance, a suave, debonair gentleman with quick fingers and a silver tongue. But did you know that 8 out of every 10 bards have come in contact with a fantasy STD during their adventures without even knowing it? Have you recently experienced any of the following unexplained symptoms? Unending urination, warts with consciousness, sprouted tentacles, genital wings, crawling rash, anal portals, molten discharge? If so, you need Dr. Ungwin's Bard Rub, the only ointment on the market specifically designed for the most polyamorous of bards and adventurers. Most users see a 50% decrease in symptoms in just 2 applications, so don't wait for those tentacles to grow to maturity. Contact your nearest apothecary or witch doctor and tell them you need Dr. Ungwin's Bard Rub. Bard Rub has not been reviewed by the Safe Ointment Board. Side effects of Bard Rub include genital petrification, chemical burns, incontinence, and in some rare cases, death. Bard Rub is not to be used in conjunction with any other product from Dr. Ungwint, including Ungwint's bath salts and Ranger eye cream.
So you did mention theater of the mind versus always having maps out, and that's another thing. Not every DM is either willing or able to do a full theater of the mind combat system. And not every player is going to be okay with that. Some people want to see the actual layout. They want to see the images. They want to see the map. They want to see the distance. They want it all, particularly plotted, which is not a bad thing. You do need to know beforehand whether your DM is going to be doing that or not.
As a DM, I rarely map unless it's combat, but frequently combat's just a grid so that everybody knows how far away they are from everything, though, for me, because it's just easier to keep everything straight, I think. As a player, I find it very difficult to, especially with the way combat and most of the abilities are structured in D&D, it's pretty hard to feel like I'm keeping track of exactly what all's happening and going on, and how close am I to this person in relation to this person, and stuff like that can matter pretty quickly sometimes, in some, depending on your campaign. But there are ways to run combat that totally don't rely on those kind of specific distinctions. You can kind of just do the bands, range bands of combat or something that they've introduced into these other systems that take away the specific what square am I questions. And yeah, that's a big difference in play, and how the spells and abilities your characters have translate into what you can kind of do during the combat, or during outside of combat, stuff like that.
And we're back. Hello, everybody. This has been your STYAB Table 13. We are talking about kobolds. The little...
Right again.
I did.
Good job.
Yep, I'm trying. It's written down a few times phonetically all around me, so I can't... When I look in a direction, I just see kobold. It's nice. It helps. I have to do this with more things.
It's gonna make for a weird looking workspace.
You have really strange names written all over your computer monitor. Yes, it's for work. We have been discussing the lore about these little dragon guys that love to mine so much they built a religion out of it. But now we're going to get kind of in the nitty gritty here, and welcome if you're just coming to this part of the video from skipping ahead. Hello. This is the future. You've made it.
Time.
It's stats time. So in these guys are a playable race, as I think Morden Kanan made that possible, right? It was,
Volos.
Oh, Volos.
I think.
Yeah. made that possible. But we're going to start with the NPC because I think that, especially in 5e, this is 5e stats.
Right.
Because I think that they did a reasonable job at making these guys both non-threatening and very threatening in large groups.
Mm-hmm.
So they have an armor class of 12, real low, not very high. They have 5 hit points, which means that a d6 can bring them down in 1 hit.
Basically, any dagger swing from a proficient wielder is going to drop them more often than not.
Murk them. They have a speed of 30 feet, which is actually pretty good for small creatures.
Yeah, considering they're small.
Yes, that's pretty good. It's 5 feet larger than most of the small creatures have.
Right.
They have a 7 strength, and that's a -2 on their modifier. A 15 dex because they're little tiny and they're quick little guys. 9 con because they are again tiny, and 8 intelligence because they just like to mine, and that's about all they know how to do. A 7 wisdom, because again, they mine.
Just mining.
Just mining. And an 8 charisma, because mining doesn't take a lot of charisma to do. They have dark vision out to 60 feet, a passive perception of 8. They speak common and draconic, which is kind of cool. And apparently when they talk, it sounds like a dog. It's like a yapping.
Yeah. They used to have their own language called, I think it's like Yip Yak or something. It was like a dialect of Draconic.
That's cool.
But there's that Yip Yip from Kobold Fight Club is the sort of homage to that tradition. But yeah, that's their dog-like description.
Yeah.
I think at the beginning of their history as well has something to do with that. But it's also kind of, you think about it, the way their head's shaped and like what they think dinosaur type, stuff with that shaped head, the sounds they make were. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, kind of cool.
They're rated as a 1/8 CR. So again, just one of these guys is a level 1 party member could just destroy one kobold. It's not going to be a challenge at all. The challenge is the next few things. 2 kobolds. They have sunlight sensitivity, which, they have disadvantage on attack rolls or perception checks that rely on sight in direct sunlight, which is not great. But they do have pack tactics, which is a gross ability that gives attack rolls advantage as long as there is an ally within 5 feet of the thing you're attacking that isn't incapacitated. If you are in a sea of little things with sharp sticks that have this, you're in for a bad time.
You're even a level 1 character with dealing with 2 of them.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Maybe that's goblins at 1/4 CR. That should be a much tougher encounter. But 2 of these with pack tactics, or 1 of these and 2 wolves or something.
Not great.
You're in trouble if they've got a net and spears or something.
You
can layer this up very quickly and just ruin people.
So the regular kobold has just a dagger and a sling,
Right.
which, you know, is only a 1d4 plus 2 piercing or a 1d4 plus 2 bludgeoning ranged, which isn't going to be a lot unless you have 30 of these attacks coming at you a turn, and then it's going to stack up quite a bit. And then
Yeah, if they're all attacking with advantage as well, then, you know, you're gonna be taking damage more often.
Ooh, yeah, I don't care if you have a 18 AC, some of those attacks are still getting
Right.
through. It's gonna sound like
throwing 10 dice at advantage, then one of them is gonna hit. One of them will crit probably.
Yep.
I
It
mean-
just sounds like, you know, like a bell at the side of a gravel road. Just ding, 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 ding. Ow!
You know, one of them. Oh god. Ding, 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 ding.
Oh god! So the winged variety has a fly speed of 30 feet in addition to the 30 feet of running. And instead of the sling, they have dropped rock, which is a +5 to hit, a 1d6 +3. So
And you can expand on that logic.
yes,
If they are able to drop a rock, they're able to drop anything.
anything.
Anything that they could carry and fly with. So there's all sorts of weird and terrible substances that they could have a bucket of, or
And that's really
any number of things.
kind of the crux of the NPC Kobold, is that, you know, alone or in a little group, they're not going to pose much of a threat, and it's not really, that's not usual. You know, you're not going to five of these guys. You know, you're going to 500. If you found 5, there is another 300 of their brothers and sisters somewhere.
Yeah, not far away probably.
Right,
It would be really strange to find that small of a group, I feel.
Right.
In the standard understanding of like how they exist and
in
stuff, I
this
think.
world as well too. Yeah.
Right,
Again, you can make your kobolds however you want to, but I think that does kind of speak to like using lower CR creatures in ways that challenge higher CR parties, because that leads, I think, to more feelings of like real difficulty, or feelings of really like getting over some kind of obstacle that, you know, you have like kind of that rising, falling, rising confidence, you know, like, oh, these guys are little like, and then you get into the shit and you're like, oh my god, holy crap.
Yeah.
And then you beat them finally, and you drag yourself out of the cave with the you know 6 chests. You're like, we fucking earned that. You know, that was
Wow, look at all the crap they had. That's why they had that stupid swinging blade trap and the extra pits and all the extra, you know, it's like, okay. So yeah, and so I think that when you look at these stat blocks, like you're saying, I think that they are really good at doing what the concept of kobolds are supposed to do in combat. And they represent these the like tradition of being fucking terrifying ambush tactic, you know, trap predators, but like you're saying, incredibly vulnerable alone. Like you compare either of these stat blocks to a goblin, just a standard goblin, 1-to-1. The goblin's going to be a tougher fight for your, you know, it's a 15 AC in comparison, and, you know, 7 hit points compared to 5 and so on. But yeah, you just add one more kobold or one ally with your kobold, or some sort of other situational benefit that would be in character, and suddenly is like way more threatening.
Way harder. So, yep.
Yeah, they're super cool for that.
In the NPC department. In the player character department, we have some...
I got problems.
Yeah.
Because it's, unfortunately, essentially the exact same stat block. They've kind of done a little bit of different things. So, here, I'll just... I guess I'll run through those real quick here. So the original printing, as I recall anyway, and from what I found, this got errated fairly recently, to take away the -2 strength, but originally they were printed with a +2 dex and a -2 to strength. That is now listed as a +2 strength in all sources I can find officially, other than the actual books.
They've removed the -2 on strength.
But that's it as far as ability modifiers are concerned. They have dark vision of 60 feet. They have sunlight sensitivity, which is essentially the same as in the NPC stat block. It's worded slightly differently to specify that if either you or your target are in direct sunlight. And then they have pack tactics, which is as printed in the stat block. And then they have another extra action special ability that they can do called grovel, cower, and beg.
It's dumb. I don't like
a
it.
dumb I don't like the move isn't bad.
No.
Which is, as an action, your allies gain an advantage on attacks against a target creature within 10 feet that can see you, I think, until the end of your next turn, once per short or long rest. It's not like super good. I think it's it plays into that meme of the kobold that just doesn't want to get splatted like he's seen every other kobold he knows get murdered. But it is super inconsistent. That idea that all the stuff that we were just talking about with kobolds, it doesn't seem like they should do this. But if they just called it Warcry or coordinated assault or what, some sort of disrupting feint or whatever, they could have done something to make this not the same problem, I guess, but that's one of several issues I have with the mechanics that they've selected here, because it's just a whole cloth copy of the NPC stat block,
because you get
which is
pack
lame.
tactics. You get pack tactics.
Yes,
which
you
is
absolutely
crazy
do.
Powerful.
It's so strong.
Oh my god.
And between that and sunlight sensitivity, there isn't room in the stat block for anything else that's super meaningful. So this grovel, cower, and beg, you only get once per short or long rest, and it's just to give a round of advantage, which it's nice, but it's not really. Everybody still has to get there. They still all have to. I don't know. It's not amazing. It just helps focus everybody on the person that you're going to want to be in contact with, or that you're going to be attacking, and so you can benefit from your pack tactics. But yeah, there's just this silly situation where you kind of are in normal situations, you're going to kind of always have advantage, but also always have disadvantage imposed. So it neutrals out, where I think
just clunky way of doing that. Just a clunky way of neutraling it out, because really it invites players to try to overcome those restrictions in ways that will just create an overpowered character very easily and very quickly, because that's what they're going to want to do. And
it's silly to think, I guess, that you wouldn't, right? If you build in a weakness to your character, it would be natural for any member of that race who has that weakness to address it and deal with it in their normal everyday life. So, if it was something as simple as, when the sun is bright, my eyes hurt, there would be a problem. They would do something about that and solve that in a way that's manageable and attainable by the average individual, if it's common for them to be on the surface.
Yes.
Or because there are other races that deal with that similarly.
Yep.
And so I think that that's a weird one. And then also, it's like we were saying, it's clunky, because either nothing happens, so they're both, because they're canceling each other out.
Then they don't get the benefits of either of those abilities, making everybody else better than them.
Exactly. Or they're getting advantage all the time.
Or they're exactly.
They have an extra layer of advantage all the time.
That's
because
ridiculous.
That they can just I'll use a greatsword even though I get disadvantage because I'm a small character. Who cares? I have pack tactics. I'm
playing a kobold fucking rogue with sunglasses. I am now adding my sneak attack die to every attack I make, as long as there is an ally somewhere near me. Within 5 feet, obviously, but still.
But you'll always have advantage.
Oh my
But
gosh.
I mean, in those situations, you would have already qualified for sneak attack because it's effectively the same trigger if there's another person. within 5 feet. So yes, layering advantage on top of that though is very powerful for rogues. I guess my gripe though is that then that's basically what you should play.
Right.
And doing not that, you can do some other things that are really interesting and very fun.
A Kobold
with
monk would
advantage
be
all the
pretty cool.
time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that would be hilarious.
Like a barbarian or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You can it would be really fun to me. Like that idea of I'm going to use an oversized weapon so that and benefit from pack tactics all the time, and then basically operate like an oversized, like a small character who functions just like your, orc version would.
Yep. He's just holding the battle axe like this.
Huge warhammer around or something. Like I'm all about that. Like that would be hilarious. But it's I don't know. They could have done some stuff that actually goes in keeping with like this lore that they've established with them. That's like give the player characters, okay, yeah, you don't get pack tactics, but maybe we also ignore sunlight sensitivity, and then we can give you actually what I was thinking is you could swap the grovel, cower, and beg for a X per short or long rest use of granting yourself advantage on in the situations where pack tactics would grant you advantage, and like so you get some of that without just handing them advantage all the time, basically, or and then give them like a stone cunning or a trap cunning or something that's
like
similar
cunning,
to like the way dwarves get that.
Yeah,
because they're supposed to be good at that stuff. Maybe give them like, I don't know, if they're really really good at mining, maybe they have like a move earth cantrip or something.
Yeah,
you could go down that line with things.
That'd be interesting too.
Give them a little bit more of the elemental spirit vibe, but I think or innate spellcasting to go more with the draconic bloodline thing. Like maybe they don't have a breath weapon like Dragonborn, but you could do something along the lines of, whatever, something to represent that heritage in, that they're true dragons, that like Dragonborn get more dragon characteristics than kobolds do.
Right.
And that's weird.
Yeah.
Maybe give them like an intimidate or a charm or
a breath weapon. Just give them a breath
I would like a breath weapon. For me, if they were just small Dragonborn, essentially, I would be okay with that.
It'd be terrifying though. I do not want to face like
focus
a whole...
on a subterranean thing.
Oof.
Like
oof.
That'd be if they had a breath weapon. Oh man.
Yeah. Oh man. Going up against
a crowd of them.
Yeah. Just like, oh no.
Because if you did like Dragonborn, where they like have a resistance to their type, that's a world of hurt.
Oof.
Those exist in my setting now.
Yeah, right. I was going to say,
awesome.
yeah. So you can. I think that they're really good for as a canvas to really challenge your higher level parties with lower CR creatures that have mechanics or abilities that fit together in challenging ways, such as giving a bunch of little shitters a breath weapon and advantage against that damage.
And it's
type.
not way off brand because they are, everyone's going to say kobold and they're thinking of a dragon-like little entity.
Yep.
So they might have wings. They might have, breath weapon isn't way off base.
No, not at all. Especially with the draconic bloodline kind of stuff, like or some sort of sorcery access too, maybe being pretty common. Give a bunch of them firebolt or whatever, or something equivalent, and like, suddenly those murder holes that their arrows were coming out of, you've got beams of death fire. Yeah, like, not okay.
Maybe they make that whole room like a brass walled thing.
Yeah,
so
bronze
over time, it slowly just gets hotter and hotter, and they don't care because they're warm blooded or whatever. Yeah, and there's a lot of cool. I think there's room for them to have been much more interesting as a character race
than what we got in Volo's guide. Yeah,
because they they said, okay, well we don't want to be too disingenuous to the NPC block, and all they have is pack tactics and sunlight sensitivity. And if you give them sunlight sensitivity, they need something huge to balance it out. So you kind of have to give them pack tactics, and then now there's no room for anything else that's
Yep.
super significant, and you're in this spot where kobolds are kind of lame.
Yep. Either they're kind of lame or they are not necessarily overpowered, but just unbalanced. I would say just out of the clunky. Even if you give your kobold sunglasses, you know, it's just going to mitigate the disadvantage that's already leveled on you, and your benefit for that is an ability that it gets duplicated by other classes. And I wish there was just a better way of doing pack tactics, because I think that's honestly where the problem lies, is with that
it's too strong, and they need something significant to
Right.
whichever, you know, it's a chicken and the egg situation. One requires the other. So if you have sunlight sensitivity, it's imposing disadvantage in a very common set of circumstances. So you need something that's going to basically give you advantage in a set of very common circumstances.
Yep.
On, you know, if not all the same checks, at least the more important half of the same checks, which is the attack rolls. So I see the logic. I understand why if you bring one, the other one has to come with. But I think they could have just said, okay, character kobolds don't have sunlight sensitivity.
Right. I mean, it almost sounds like they should have made another race of kobolds, almost like a
Right,
this is
sub-race,
a
you
top, like a non-subterranean race that are more individualistic, because then you could even like kind of make the grovel, cower, and beg a little bit more meaningful, because you're part of a kobold culture and race that isn't as communalistic,
more like traditional goblins would, or
Right.
you know, it's like they'll get bullied by something that's stronger than them into showing up and on the battlefield, but as soon as that person's dead, they're out of there, kind of thing. Like and then that's like oh my god, please don't kill me. Makes a ton of sense. One of the other good arguments I did hear for that thing making sense for a like martially proficient or combat ready race was the idea that, like, in sort of conflict mitigation stuff, they tell you it's one of the strategies is to, you know, if you can give off the impression of not being as calm, cool, and collected as you actually are, then that's something that may be able to, you know, open up an opportunity for you to take advantage of in a situation where you're threatened by somebody, if they don't think you're a threat anymore, because they think they've scared you into compliance or whatever.
Right.
That's maybe a beneficial thing. So I understand that logic, that it doesn't mean that they're actually terrified. It means that they're willing to throw themselves in front of the guy and say, "Oh my God, please don't kill me," while everybody else is circling around to stab them or something. You know, and it's so there is a logic there. It just, they could have called it anything else, and it would have been, and painted it just a little differently, and I would have been fine with that feature.
I mean, really, like honestly, it's just like kind of the base thing of, oh yeah, my player character has an ability that begins with, as an action, you can cower pathetically. Like, that just doesn't sound cool, you know?
There are players who are, is like, I'm playing to play a hero.
Right,
Like,
I don't want to
pick a race that in mechanics typecasted as this, like, kind of farce a little bit. And I get, I think that's where a lot of the frustration that comes from, is that people, like, either don't like seeing those players at their tables, or don't want to make that kind of character, so they think that that's a dumb feature. I think there are just as many people who think that's hilarious, and that's how they wanted to play a kobold anyway, so it's fantastic for them. But
it's got good roleplay potential too. I think, like, it's got more roleplay potential than other
funny.
Like, if you named it something else,
like
it wouldn't elicit as much maybe interesting roleplay.
Tactician type thing. People would just say, oh, okay, so they're basically like hobgoblins or something. And this is more of a, it's more impactful if somebody throws themselves on their knees and says, begging for their life as like a combat tactic. You know, that is not something that you see in any of the other races. Stuff. I think the closest you'll get is like goblins have like a runaway thing,
right?
And stuff along those lines, which is was cool. Yeah, and I think that they could have done something more like that, and it would have been better.
Yeah.
But, so it goes.
So it goes.
I like kobolds as a concept. On as a race, I would probably be. I'm going to be looking at putting together my own kobold race that I want to cover because it's,
I think I am
it's
too.
not.
Yep.
I don't like how basic you become because of the sunlight sensitivity pack tactics situation.
Yep.
If you take those out, there's room for a really flavorful race there where you actually tie them to this culture that's supposed to be established. And give them like a +1 to con or something because they're miners, and everyone else who's a subterranean race gets a con bonus. So why not, or something?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is 11:55. I think we have talked kobolds into the ground, so to speak.
Because they live there.
They're from the ground. They're the ground guys.
About that.
So we are Irrational Radio. We do this every Thursday at 10:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, the best time zone, where we sit and talk about a bunch of different aspects of tabletop role-playing. We also do interviews sometimes, and generally just have a good time, spend an hour and a half discussing the whole facet of this wonderful hobby. We also stream ourselves playing games of this variety. On Monday, we do Old for Gold, which I drag Mr. E here and a couple of other of my good friends through a big old desert in the northeast part of my world. So check them out at Mondays at 9:30 p.m. CST as they discover treasures and monsters and dead gods. We are also planning on hosting 2 more streams. The first one is going to be a continuation of our podcast, which you can find anywhere podcasts are grown. Podbean, Spotify.
It's called Dragons of Paralandia.
Dragons of Paralandia, yes. Well, we're going to continue that story, not with the same characters, but along in the country that the podcast formed. You can check that out in the end of March. And then we are also planning on a Pathfinder, no, Starfinder,
which is the sci-fi game made by the people who made Pathfinder, as I understand it.
And I am going to be a player in that one. I am not going to be the DM. The DM is going to be done by the wonderful Mr. Kyle West. So check that out. That's going to happen on Tuesdays. I don't think if we have an actual physical
I'm
time
guessing that'll
hammered
be a
out,
month or so out here. But
yeah,
somewhere in the upcoming months, we'll have another stream cropping up on the Tuesdays.
Yep. Other than that, we do have a Discord where you can join us in our bunch of shenanigans. We have a wonderful community that is always happy to help out and answer questions that you might have. We also have a website where you can buy some of our merchandise, as well as your own dice to fill out your collection, you dice goblin, you. And if you really like us, we also have a Patreon where you can throw us some money so we can continue to do videos such as this. So thank you again, folks, for joining us tonight. This has been your Table 13. Have a good night, everybody. Goodbye.